I'm Dr. Beth Radulski. I hold a PhD in Sociology, specializing in Neurodiversity Inclusion, and I'm also an autistic person. Today we're going to be starting our Neurodiversity 101 course with our Part 1, Introduction to Neurodiversity. So the first thing we need to know to understand neurodiversity are what the medical and social models of disability are. So traditionally, the medical model is what has informed our understanding about neurodivergence and disability more broadly. Now, the medical model takes the stance that if a disabled individual or a neurodivergent individual is having difficulty participating in society, this can be with schooling, with employment, with social life, or beyond, that it's a purely biological issue. So the classic example of this is if we have a disabled person in a wheelchair and they would like to gain employment. And they attend an interview only to realize that there are stairs into the building and no ramp. That's obviously going to prevent that individual from accessing the work environment. That doesn't mean the person is biologically incapable of working though, and that's where the social model comes in. So while the medical model would say, this person has a physical impairment and therefore that impairment is preventing them from participating in society, the social model would say, well, hey, that might be one part of the picture here, but it's actually a lot more nuanced than that, because if that building did have a ramp, that person could enter and they could therefore participate in the workplace. The concept of neurodiversity was coined by the neurodivergent community, and it really emerged as part of the debate around the medical versus the social model of disability. So it's this idea that in the same way that society is culturally diverse, people are physically diverse, we have different bodies, we have different minds as well. And part of neurodiversity inclusion is going to be moving beyond the idea that a neurodivergent neurotype is necessarily going to be an impairment that prevents a person from participating in society. That's not to say these individuals don't experience disability. That's not to say in some cases that there aren't genuine cases of physical impairment itself. An impairment is really about the biological underlying issue, but it's just acknowledging that society is also going to play an important role in that individual's life outcomes. Whether they're able to find employment, are they able to succeed in school, are they included in social life? These are things that go well beyond biological causes, and it's acknowledging that as a society, we're going to have a role to play in facilitating participation and inclusion. Now, the final thing we need to cover in a very basic introduction to neurodiversity is some terminology. So there's a lot of debate going on around how to use different terms that are related to neurodiversity. So we're just going to do a basic introduction to these terms. Term 1 is obviously neurodiversity itself. What does this term mean? Neurodiversity refers to the diversity in neurological functioning, so the way that our minds process information and interact with the outside world. And it's the idea that society, human beings, are going to be neurodiverse. That means in the same way that we have diversity across different cultures, across genders, for example, there are going to be a range of ways that people process information. So who is included in this big term neurodiversity? The answer might surprise some of you because it is everybody. Everyone is under the neurodiversity umbrella. So that means whether you come from a neurodivergent neurotype or what we might also call a neurominority group, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, mental health conditions, even some people advocating for conditions like multiple sclerosis to be included here because it significantly impacts the way the mind functions and that it deviates from the norm. So we do have neurominority groups, we do have neurodivergent neurotypes. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but even people who are typically developing, so a neurotypical person who doesn't have any other developmental condition or diagnosis or identity, they would still be under that neurodiversity umbrella, because in the same way that society is culturally diverse, society is neurodiverse. Therefore, neurodiversity includes everybody. How do these neurotypes present in society? Now, we might like to think of a neurotype as something that is defined purely by a diagnostic manual. You either are autistic because you meet these diagnostic criteria, or you are not. And that's part of the equation, but it actually goes well beyond that. As an autistic person, I identify very strongly with the autistic community. I am a part of that social group. In the same way that as a Canadian person, I identify quite strongly as someone who's from Canada. I feel at home there. That is my group of people. I understand the culture. I feel very similarly about the autistic identity. Neurotypical people experience privilege, and this is an idea that comes right from that social model of disability. This group has better employment outcomes, they have better educational outcomes, better social outcomes, quality of life, mental health and well-being is all significantly higher than, for example, in the autistic population. So neurodiversity as a concept is really something that allows us to identify factors that are part of society that may play into those outcomes. That pretty much does it for a basic introduction to Neurodiversity 101. I hope you've enjoyed the video today. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and follow along for the rest of the series.